Welcome back. In the previous episode, I talked about how Second Army attempted to clear the Soviet bridgeheads at the Don. One of them was eliminated, but two others remained, posing a serious threat to the army and the entire southeastern front. Let's see what happened in the fall and winter months before the Soviet counterattack. In October 1942, winter preparations commenced. Arpad Lajtos, who was assigned to the staff of Second Army in the same month, explained much later that a weakened and shaken army was trying to defend its positions against a superior enemy, feeling abandoned and forgotten. Temperatures were already dropping, so digging trenches or erecting obstacles was not enough. Winter bunkers and protected shelters had to be built before the ground completely froze. Lack of tools and raw materials hindered these efforts. The supply situation continued to worsen due to the weak rail network and repeated partisan attacks in the hinterland. For example, mosquito nets arrived in November. Collection of winter clothing started back in Hungary, but this also took time. In the meantime, Vilmos Nagy, the newly appointed Minister of Defense, declared in Parliament that in this war he did not recognize different races, ethnicities, or religions. He only saw good or bad soldiers. First, he visited Hitler, asking for more German weapons, supplies, and fuel, adding that a reduction in forces in Soviet Russia was desired by the Hungarian government. Hitler promised more support, but a recall of Second Army was out of the question. In fact, the Hungarians soon had to send two more security divisions to Ukraine, the 1st and the 201st, even though the Home Defense Army, the troops that remained within Hungary, were still not properly equipped, and Second Army's losses could not be replaced either. Hitler seemed confident. Nagy did not share his optimism, but he could not achieve anything. The minister then visited Second Army at the Don, where he received a detailed report from Lieutenant General Gustav Jány himself. The two old friends also met in private. Jány asked to be replaced, but his request was categorically denied later on by Admiral Horthy, who hoped that Jány would not bow to the Germans. Both Nagy and Jány saw that Second Army was stretched thin. They had enough men to occupy the lines, but nothing more. There were no significant reserves, so a serious Soviet attack would definitely break through. Not long after, Chief of Staff Ferenc Szombathely also visited the troops. He agreed with Jány's assessment, but there was not much else they could do. Hungary didn't have enough weapons to equip its military, so priority was given to the Home Army. Replacements were kept within the country. Second Army received the bare essentials, although the picture was mixed. There are many urban legends in Hungary regarding Second Army. People tend to dismiss the entire enterprise, emphasizing that bicycle troops were sent to the Soviet Union, that the troops were not given warm clothing and proper weapons, that they were sent there only to die. In reality, Second Army received 2/3 of the available equipment. Its light divisions were initially better equipped than those that stayed in Hungary, and the government eventually started sending surplus food and winter clothing, along with some replacement units, although these arrived with small arms only. However, since Second Army didn't have a lot of vehicles, around 80% of the heavy equipment and supplies were moved by horse-drawn carts, and the horses required fodder, further complicating the situation. In late September, most horses, around 60,000, were gathered and moved away from the front to prevent heavy winter losses. Engines of motor vehicles were shipped back to Hungary for maintenance, so supplies slowed down even more. Adequate winter clothing arrived by train at Stary Oskol, the central supply depot, but these could not be distributed among the troops due to a lack of transportation. The men were given German rations, which included artificial honey, artificial margarine, and even sardines, but many soldiers refused to touch them, so from December, surplus food with bacon, sausages, and palinka, the traditional drink, had to be shipped from Hungary, but even these did not always reach frontline units. Most of the available rail capacity was used by the Germans to supply 6th Army and 4th Panzer Army at Stalingrad. Not much was left for the Hungarians. The troops were underfed, more than half of their clothing needed to be replaced, so once the cold weather arrived, an unusually high rate of sickness and frostbite was the immediate result. Guarding the river were 9 light divisions, which were weaker than the German or Soviet infantry divisions, as they only had 2 regiments instead of 3. They had to watch a 200-kilometer long section of the Don, which was wide, but it could be crossed at many points, especially once winter arrived and the ice became thick enough even for tanks. Lieutenant General Jani asked his German superiors for permission to withdraw some of the light divisions and concentrate available forces around the bridgeheads, along with creating a larger reserve, but his requests were denied. Heeresgruppe B claimed that Hitler's permission was needed for such changes and no territory was to be given up. 1st Field Armored Division was relocated to a point near the line between Hungarian 2nd and Italian 8th armies. Then it became the reserve force for Heeresgruppe B itself, along with 2 German infantry divisions and smaller panzer forces under General Hans Kramer. After the collapse of Romanian 3rd and Italian 8th armies, this Kramer Corps was the only available force to counter a major Soviet attack in the sector. The front was relatively quiet during these months, but smaller patrols and reconnaissance attacks did take place. Soviet patrols often disarmed sentries at night and took them to the other side. This kind of infiltration was very common. Reconnaissancing force was also frequent. Platoons and even companies attacked to find weak spots and pinpoint larger guns. Hungarian troops were dismayed by the fact that their Soviet counterparts were receiving better equipment every month, along with trucks and canned food from the US, which was not a good sign. On their end, even getting enough food was a problem, not to mention the cold, against which not everybody was protected. Some clever commanders instructed field kitchens to provide charcoal. The sentries then stood on improvised platforms above the burning charcoal to keep their feet warm, avoiding frostbite. Hungarian patrols also took place during this time. One such expedition was later described in an interview. A squad of 12 men quietly crossed the Don, crawling on the thick ice at night. They approached the nearest Soviet bunker. One of them kicked the door open and entered, but he faced a Soviet officer holding a hand grenade. He smiled, stepped back, but managed to throw his own hand grenade into the bunker before turning around and running away. The bunker collapsed, alarms rang out. One of his comrades was sprayed by a sentry's machine gun, hitting him with 9 bullets. He knocked down the sentry, picked up his body, and retreated towards the Don with the others. In the dark, they did not find the place where they cleared the mines and cut a hole in the fence, so they cut a new hole and started moving back through the minefield. 4 of them were holding the wounded comrade, but a mine exploded under them. One soldier lost his heel. The already wounded one received around 100 shrapnels, but they continued, dragging his lifeless body on the ice using their belts. On the other side, everybody was waiting for the signal to provide fire support. Once it showed up, all machine guns and anti-tank guns opened fire, holding back the Soviets, who could no longer follow the retreating Hungarians. The squad reached their own line. To their astonishment, the severely wounded soldier was still alive, and he survived, despite having 9 bullets and around 100 shrapnels in his body. Such was the life at the front during these quiet months. In December, Italian 8th Army collapsed. In January, the first replacement troops arrived, but this coincided with the Soviet counterattack, leading to further complications. I will talk about this in the next episode. Until then, feel free to check out my other videos on the subject and other topics. Thank you for watching. See you next time.